I have to say this. I had stated in one of my previous videos, I can't remember the title, it was the one where I talk about the rap beef with Remy Ma and Nicki Minaj, and how it reminded me so much of the diva attitudes of a lot of so-called spiritual practitioners. And how I tried to befriend a lot of them, and a lot of them just weren't having it. I now realize a lot of it was insecurity on their part. And even regardless whether or not they chose to befriend me or not, for however long those messes would usually last, I noticed pretty quickly, or more rapidly over the years, that spiritual bypassing was often at play, and a lot of urgent need to distance themselves from their own dysfunction and say very quickly, almost too quickly, and this is what codependents will do, especially codependents who grew up in enmeshed families. There'll be a lot of echoism, there'll be a lot of blind repeating of what the other person just said without even processing neurologically what it is that was said. There's zero critical thinking involved. It's simply blind faith. And I think part of the reason I've sort of chosen to leave a lot of that behind, well, all of the dysfunction behind, I don't want to be a party to that anymore. I'm not going to co-sign on anyone's bullshit, like I said before, ever again. This is what happens when you become ornery and emancipated from that psychological trap, is that you realize how much time is wasted in a person's life that involves spiritual bypassing, especially if you're in a quote-unquote spiritual job, and how you cannot bullshit yourself and call yourself a healer if you refuse to clean up your own backyard. So when I say these healers who I can't get with are bitchy, it's not really that. It's more that first of all, they can never listen to anybody else's point of view. They tend to not listen to any other source outside of their own and their spirit guide, what their spirit guides are telling them, which I think is complete bullshit. You don't know if that's a trickster or whatever. Maybe it's just delusional mental illness. But I see so many people, codependents following codependents in this business. And the healers so often are just trying to run and run and run and run away from themselves in their spiritual work. It's just a drug for them. It's a form of feeling engaged while they still don't have to be engaged. And it's got to stop. I cannot put up with it. I will put my foot down on anyone who I see is spiritual bypassing. And I will tell them, this is an unhealed wound from your childhood and or a traumatic event in your life. But most likely, 90% of the time, 95% of the time, it's a traumatic, unhealed, unprocessed wound from childhood that they have the nerve, they have the cojones to project out unwittingly onto their unwitting masses who are also naive and gullible and codependent and vulnerable. And I don't say this as a not damning you with faint praise, what's the term? I'm not saying this to be patronizing or look down on anyone. I was there, okay? But I can't be there anymore and say that that is a clean way of thinking. You can't go back. Once you're mentally sound and healed enough, you don't have to be perfect. Nobody's perfect. People always have their little Achilles heel that they're going to have, or 2 or 10 or 3 or 13 or whatever. But when you get healthy, one of the things you notice is you will not go back to the way things were. You can't suffer that kind of ignorance in silence anymore. Your body reacts to it. Your body has a physical reaction to bullshit that it simply did not have before because you were asleep or parts of you were asleep. And when you have healed that part of it, you see what the wound is, and then you see that wound in everyone else. And that, I want to make a distinction between projection and understanding. The difference of projection and understanding and relating to a person's situation is seeing them unconscious before you became conscious to a toxic habit or unconscious pattern that you most likely learned in childhood, and you are unconsciously repeating it on other people. You're unconsciously, in many cases, repeating your warped experiences in childhood, no doubt, with a less than optimal parent or parents or caregiver in your life onto other people. I've noticed this a lot with healers, so-called healers, who by and large are doing a lot of harm sometimes. And I just saw this the other day, and I'm seeing this now, and it drives me crazy. I got a letter from someone recently that they went to this totally toxic, completely delusional, quote-unquote, healer who's gotten kind of fame from piggybacking on other delusional healers over the years. And she tried to get her talons in me in 2010, and I wasn't having it, and I told her to fuck off, basically. And I was really sick then, and I even saw how delusional she was. And she's got hundreds of thousands of views on her videos, her lectures, and she is out to lunch. She is certifiable and dangerous. And she was dating someone I used to date, and no, this isn't sour grapes. This is just the reality of the situation. She was following me around like a hound dog and trying to get scraps. And so she got the scraps of the antisocial personality disordered guy who's now dead, that she's milking his death with for all it's worth. She is completely delusional. And I got this poor woman who contacts me, and she's like, will you do a reading for me, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, well, I see a lot of dysfunction around you and some new age bullshit around you that you haven't addressed, that most likely is a unconscious projection or attempt to get back in the womb, so to speak, or to get back in daddy's good graces or mommy's good graces, by sublimating that into this delusional person who's been chasing me around for 7 years. So I said, listen, and I told her what happened, and I said, you are severely codependent. I picked up, again, I'm not a substitute for clinical diagnosis. Okay, I said, this is not a diagnosis, but maybe you could get some relief out of this by looking into this subject. I said, I think your mother has undiagnosed borderline personality disorder. And she said, well, I grew up in a family where my parents, I couldn't trust them, and I never felt like they supported me, and there was no love, and they were very cold. And I said, well, there's your problem. It's not chasing after the healers to find the answer. There's your problem. There's the solution as well. And I turned her down, as I so often do. This is not a moneymaker for me, ladies and gentlemen, because the answer is usually in clinical psychotherapy, but most therapists suck too, so you have to be careful about that. But looking into, in her case, daughters of undiagnosed or borderline personality mothers. That was my advice to her. And she was like, wow, I'm really going to look into that. I said, you need to go on a new age and conspiracy theory detox, because it is not good for your brain, and it's not good for your heart, and it's not good for your spirit. And just when I see this totally apparent thing going on with healers, and a lot of times it's daddy issues and mommy issues of like trying to get in the good graces of mommy and daddy. I see this over and over and over again. And they'll say things like, well, I have commitment issues, but my twin flame, he's the one that's rejecting me. He's the one that's running, And she goes on and on about how her father was a philanderer and all sorts of stuff, like just not willing to own her own shit. And it's spiritual bypassing. And then what she recommends for her listeners and her viewers is to do tapping. That's the solution, which is just a plate spinning act. It's just a distraction from the actual core trauma. Tapping is good as a supplement. It is not the main course. The main course should always be attachment issues. If you have any, look into those. Your core wound from a dysfunctional childhood home of origin doesn't mean it's a biological parent. It could be an adopted parent, a foster parent, a grandparent, whatever. Primary caregiver that was primarily in your upbringing from ages 0 to 10, let's say. That's really where to look. It's not to look into tapping as the solution. Although, it serves a point, serves a purpose, just like acupuncture, just like all of these alternative modalities, but it's never going to be the main thing that heals you. You know what the main thing that heals you is? Looking at the psychodynamics of the childhood home you grew up in. And I have to make this video because I'm tired of writing the same letter that takes me 20 to 40 to 60 minutes to write out. I really care about these people's well-being, unlike these delusionals who get all the attention. Really, honestly, I don't want the spotlight. I really don't. I hate it because that makes you a target, and I don't want to be a target. But honestly, this plate spinning act that so many of you do, like 95% of you do who are so-called healers, the Illuminati loves that. It loves the spiritual bypassing. That's another gatekeeper to keep you from true knowledge, which is your third eye. And so many of these people who claim they have their third eye open are so severely codependent and codependently enmeshed and still unconsciously dealing with their daddies that they don't understand that they're entrapped. They've been entrapped by a system. It's entrapment. It's a system that's rigged and set you up to be this way. And you are not helping the world heal. You're not being a twin flame by running from it and saying things like another healer said, where she was like, it just enraged me. I really got set off by this. She's like, well, if it doesn't work out, my guides told me that I just, I'm paraphrasing here. I don't know the exact terminology, but it was something like, there's like a blister pack that I can open up with a second one because I can just have as many as I want. And I'm like, no, you're missing the whole fucking point, lady. And I wrote her a rather terse comment, like, that's going to ever change anybody's mind. And she was, like, yelling at me in astral to, she's like, I'm in charge of myself. And I'm like, no, you aren't. Daddy is informing everything you do still. You are not emancipated. Daddy still controls everything. So that's what the Illuminists love. And, when I say Illuminists, I mean people who make recipes. It doesn't mean they put their heart and soul into it. They just know how to make a recipe. So don't say that. Don't be fearful of when I say Illuminati. Like, they're just good recipe makers. They don't have the extra something that makes food really good. Okay? Don't make it be like they have everything and we have nothing. Like, they're sociopaths. They don't have heart and soul. They're just sociopaths following a recipe. That's all they're doing. They don't understand the dynamics behind it. They're just stupid. Okay? They really are. They're clever and organized, but they're kind of stupid spiritually. So anyway, I digress. My point being is, I'm not actually digressing because they love this shit. They love these dysfunctional women with daddy issues, with philandering daddies who go into tarot card reading and say they're speaking to their spirit guides, and they love, and they don't read. That's another thing that these readers love, which is ironic. They're called readers and they don't like reading. I don't watch the news. I don't pay attention to this. I don't do that. I just listen to what spirit tells me, and that's what guides me. That's what the witch trial people said. They said that God told them that these people were witches, and they listened to a bunch of hysterical teenage girls in Salem who were probably eating bad bread that created a similar effect to being on lysergic acid, which is LSD, for those of you not know. That's what the people who killed innocent people during the Salem witch trials and witch trials throughout the century, God told us that these people were witches. And so they know in their heart that that's what it is. That's the same shit that you're doing, you dumb fucks. Sorry to sound so harsh, but you're not stupid people, but you're letting your codependency make you sound and appear as a stupid person. And none of you are stupid, and that's insulting. That insults my heart. Because you're not stupid people. You're letting your codependence rule you. And this spiritual bypassing of, I don't need to read the news. I don't need to pay attention to things. I don't need to be emotionally intelligent. I just am this puppet for spirit. And I'm just going to that's just an unconscious desire to get in daddy's good graces as well. So that's my rant. And this is why I don't really make videos or do collabs with people, because most of them have their head up their ass. Have a nice day. Don't let things freak you out. Look into things further. Don't bypass. Thank you.